The unexpected return. Marcus Kane had been fixing the atmospheric recycler on mining station Omega-7 when reality decided to take a coffee break. One moment he was elbow deep in corroded pipes, cursing the cheap Federation parts that broke every 3 months, and the next moment she was standing there in the maintenance bay like she owned the place. Zephyra Voss looked exactly the same as she had 13 years ago, when he'd pulled her half-dead body from the wreckage of a Kytherian scout ship that had crash-landed on Europa. Same silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer under artificial light. Same impossibly tall frame that made him feel like a particularly stubborn garden gnome. And those same violet eyes that could probably see through his soul and judge his life choices. "Hello, Marcus," she said in that melodic voice that had haunted his dreams for over a decade. "I told you I would return when the time was right." Marcus dropped his wrench, which clanged against the metal floor with all the dignity of a dying space whale. "Zeph, but you said you had to go back to your people. You said it wasn't safe for you to stay near humans." She stepped closer, and he noticed she was wearing some kind of form-fitting uniform that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought regular fabric was for peasants. The material shifted colors slightly as she moved, adapting to the light like liquid mercury. "Much has changed since our parting," Zephyra said, her expression growing serious. "The Hegemony Council has discovered what humans are truly capable of. They have seen the reports from the Outer Rim conflicts, witnessed how your species adapts and overcomes impossible odds. They are concerned." Marcus wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls, trying to process this information. "Concerned how?" "Like, oh, those humans are interesting concerned. Or we need to erase them from existence concerned." "The latter." Zephyra's voice carried a weight that made his stomach drop. 3 cycles ago, the Council declared humanity a Category 5 extinction risk. They have assembled the largest fleet in hegemony history. 1 million ships, Marcus. They intend to sterilize every human world, every colony, every station. The maintenance bay suddenly felt very small. Marcus had always known that humanity's rapid expansion through the galaxy had made some of the older species nervous, but he'd assumed it was just typical bureaucratic posturing. The kind of thing that got resolved with trade agreements and diplomatic handshakes. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked quietly. "Why risk coming here?" Zephyra reached into a pouch on her belt and withdrew a small, crystalline device that pulsed with inner light. "Because 13 years ago, a human showed me that your species possesses something the hegemony fears above all else: compassion, coupled with an absolute refusal to surrender." She pressed the device into his palm. It felt warm, almost alive. "And because I believe that same human can help me save both our peoples from the war that is coming." The price of compassion. The crystalline device in Marcus's palm suddenly projected a holographic star map that filled half the maintenance bay. Red markers dotted the display like a rash of bad news, each one representing a hegemony fleet position. Marcus counted them twice, hoping he'd made a mistake. He hadn't. "Sweet mother of recycled air," he whispered. "They're not just planning to attack, they're planning to surround us completely." Zephyra nodded grimly. "The hegemony believes in overwhelming force. They have studied human military history extensively. Your species has an unfortunate habit of fighting longer than mathematically possible, so they intend to eliminate any chance of resistance." Marcus studied the hologram more carefully. The hegemony fleets were positioned at every major hyperspace junction, every trade route, every possible escape vector from human space. It was the kind of strategic planning that took years to coordinate and suggested a level of fear that went way beyond rational caution. "But here's what I don't understand," Marcus said, looking up at Zephyra. "You're Kytherian nobility, right? Your people are part of the Hegemony Council. Why are you warning us?" Zephyra was quiet for a moment, her violet eyes distant. "Do you remember what you said to me when you found me in that wreckage? When I begged you to leave me and save yourself?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I said a lot of stupid things that day. I was hopped up on adrenaline and emergency stims. You said that no one deserves to die alone and afraid, no matter where they came from or what species they belonged to. Then you carried me 3 kilometers through a radiation storm to get me to medical aid." Zephyr's voice softened. I had never encountered such a logical kindness before. The memory came flooding back. Zephyra had been trapped under twisted metal, her breathing shallow, strange blue blood pooling around her. The radiation from Europa's surface had been cooking both of them slowly, and Marcus had known that stopping to help her would probably kill them both. But he'd looked into those violet eyes and seen something that transcended species boundaries. The universal fear of dying alone. The Hegemony Council believes that compassion is a weakness. Zephyr'a continued. They see humanity's willingness to help other species, to form alliances with anyone who asks, as evidence of evolutionary instability. They think it makes you unpredictable and dangerous. Marcus barked out a laugh that held no humor. So they're going to commit genocide because we're too nice. They are going to commit genocide because they have observed what happens when human compassion is paired with human stubbornness. Zephyr'a gestured to the hologram, which shifted to show footage of recent conflicts. The siege of Kepler Station, where Captain Rodriguez held off an entire pirate fleet for 6 months to protect civilian refugees. The defense of New Tuscany, where a single human colony ship disabled a Hegemony dreadnought using improvised weapons, and sheer bloody-mindedness. The footage was impressive, Marcus had to admit. Humans had a talent for turning desperate situations into Pyrrhic victories for their enemies. The Council fears that if humanity continues to expand and influence other species with your values, the entire galactic order will destabilize. Zephyr's expression was grim. They would rather destroy you now than risk that future. Marcus closed his fist around the crystal device, feeling its warm pulse against his palm. So what's your plan? Because I'm guessing you didn't come all this way just to give me the galaxy's most depressing news update. The network awakened Zephyr's plan was either brilliant or completely insane, and Marcus couldn't decide which possibility scared him more. They were currently aboard her ship, the whispered promise, heading toward the Centauri junction at speeds that made his teeth ache. The vessel itself was a marvel of Cytherian engineering, all flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them like liquid glass. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Marcus said, reviewing the tactical display for the 5th time. You want to activate something called the Emergency Beacon Network, which hasn't been used since the Hegemony was formed 4,000 years ago, to send a simultaneous message to every human settlement in the galaxy. Precisely. Zephyr's fingers danced across her ship's control interface, which responded to her touch like a living thing. The network was designed as a last resort communication system for member species facing extinction-level threats. It bypasses all normal channels and reaches directly into the quantum substrate that underlies hyperspace. Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to process the implications. And you think this will somehow convince the Hegemony to call off their genocide fleet? No, Zephyr'a said quietly. I think it will give humanity the one thing you need most, time. To prepare. The ship shuddered slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace near Centauri Station. The massive orbital platform hung in space like a steel flower, its docking arms extended to embrace incoming vessels from dozens of different species. It was one of the few truly neutral zones in the galaxy, where Hegemony law enforcement rubbed shoulders with human traders and everyone pretended to get along. The network node is located in the station's core, Zephyr'a explained as they approached the docking bay. It's been dormant for so long that most people have forgotten it exists. But your people need to know what's coming, Marcus. They need to know that the Hegemony fears them enough to assemble the largest military force in galactic history. As they docked, Marcus caught sight of the other ships in the bay. Sleek Altarian pleasure craft, massive Drokan cargo haulers, and scattered among them, the angular, aggressive shapes of human vessels, even in neutral space. The human ships looked ready for a fight. There's something else, Zephyr'a said as they prepared to disembark. The beacon message will reach every human settlement, but it will also reach every species that has ever been oppressed by the Hegemony, every world that has chafed under Council rule, every colony that has been forced to surrender their resources or their independence. Marcus paused at the airlock door. You're not just warning humanity. You're starting a revolution. The Hegemony has maintained order through fear for millennia. Zephyra replied, "They have convinced countless species that resistance is futile, that their technology and numbers make them invincible. But they have never faced a species quite like humanity before. They made their way through Centauri Station's corridors, past markets selling everything from Andromedan spices to vegan crystal matrices. The station hummed with the controlled chaos of interstellar commerce, beings of a dozen different species conducting business with the casual efficiency of long practice. The network node was hidden behind layers of bureaucratic camouflage disguised as a maintenance access point in the station's lower levels. Zephyra's clearance codes were apparently very impressive, because the security systems practically rolled over and played dead as they approached the chamber. The node itself was ancient, a crystalline structure that pulsed with the same inner light as the beacon device. When Zephyra placed her hand on the control surface, the entire chamber came alive with swirling energy patterns. "Are you ready?" she asked, looking at Marcus with those violet eyes that had started this entire chain of events 13 years ago. Marcus thought about every human settlement scattered across the galaxy, all the families and colonies and mining stations like Omega-7 that had no idea what was coming for them. He thought about the hegemony's million-ship fleet, and about the look of fear he'd seen in Zephyra's eyes when she described the Council's plans. "Do it." The message spreads the emergency beacon. Network activated with a sound like reality tearing at the seams. Throughout the chamber, holographic displays showed the quantum pulse spreading outward at impossible speeds, branching through hyperspace lanes and bypass routes, reaching toward every corner of human-occupied space and beyond. Marcus watched in fascination as the message reached the first human settlements on New Texas. Colonists stopped their morning routines to stare at emergency communication terminals that hadn't activated in living memory. On the mining world of Kepler's dream, shift supervisors gathered around ancient network receivers, their faces growing pale as they absorbed the content of Zephyra's warning. But the most impressive responses came from unexpected sources. On the industrial world of New Birmingham, the local AI collective immediately began calculating defensive strategies and resource requirements. The message had reached them through quantum-entangled communication nodes that operated faster than light itself, giving them precious hours to begin preparations. "Look at this," Zephyra said, pointing to a display showing response traffic. "Your people are not panicking. They are organizing." She was right. Within the first hour of the beacon activation, human settlements were already coordinating their responses. Trade routes were being reconfigured to move essential supplies to strategic locations. Manufacturing centers were retooling their production lines to focus on defensive equipment. Most importantly, messages were flowing between previously isolated colonies, creating communication networks that had never existed before. "This is what the Hegemony Council feared," Zephyra observed, watching the data streams with something like wonder in her voice. "They understood that humanity's greatest strength is not your individual capabilities, but your ability to cooperate when threatened." Marcus felt a surge of pride watching his species respond to the crisis. But then he noticed something else on the displays. Non-human settlements were also responding to the beacon. Altarian colonies were broadcasting support messages. Droken trade guilds were offering to share intelligence about hegemony fleet movements. Even some of the more traditionally isolationist species were reaching out with offers of assistance. "Sweet recycled air," Marcus breathed. "It's not just humans responding. The whole galaxy is waking up." Zephyra nodded, but her expression was troubled. "This is what I hoped for, but it also means the hegemony will accelerate their timeline. They cannot allow this level of organization to continue." As if summoned by her words, new alerts began flashing on the tactical displays. Hegemony fleets throughout the galaxy were changing course, abandoning their planned positions to move toward immediate strike configurations. The carefully orchestrated siege was becoming a desperate rush to prevent humanity from organizing an effective defense. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, watching the red markers shift across the holographic star map like a swarm of angry insects. 72 hours until the first fleets reach human territory, Zephyra calculated. Perhaps 96 hours until they achieve full deployment. But Marcus, "There's something else you need to understand." She manipulated the display to show the quantum communication patterns spreading throughout the galaxy. The beacon network was still active, still carrying messages between distant worlds. But now it was carrying something else as well. "The network has achieved resonance cascade," Zephyra explained. "It is no longer simply relaying messages. It is creating quantum entanglement between every world it touches, establishing permanent communication links that cannot be severed." By conventional means, Marcus stared at the display, trying to grasp the implications. "You mean humanity is now permanently connected? Every colony, every settlement, every ship?" "Not just humanity," Zephyra corrected. "Every species that has chosen to join the network. For the first time in galactic history, we have the infrastructure for true interstellar democracy." The chamber suddenly shook as Centauri station's proximity alarms began sounding. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see the sleek shapes of hegemony enforcement vessels dropping out of hyperspace around the station. "They found us," he said grimly. Zephyra was already moving toward the chamber's emergency exit. "The beacon has served its purpose. Now we must ensure that the message continues to spread." As they ran through the station service corridors, Marcus could hear the sounds of controlled chaos echoing through the main levels. The hegemony ships were demanding access to the station's communication logs, trying to identify who had activated the ancient beacon system. "The choice that changes everything," whispered promise launched from Centauri Station. Just as hegemony enforcers breached the network chamber, Marcus watched through the rear sensors as the ancient beacon node overloaded and collapsed, its crystalline structure dissolving into quantum static. The network itself remained active, but this particular access point was now permanently sealed. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as Zephyra set course for the outer system. "To witness the choice that will determine the fate of both our species," she replied cryptically. Their destination turned out to be the edge of human space, where the colonial world of Heaven's Rest orbited a modest yellow star. It was an agricultural planet, home to maybe 50,000 settlers who had fled the overcrowded core worlds to build simple lives among the grain fields and orchards. Not the kind of place anyone would expect to find galactic destiny. But as they approached the system, Marcus realized that Heaven's Rest was no longer alone. Ships were arriving from every direction, not just human vessels, but craft representing dozens of different species. Altarian science ships, Droken mining barges converted to carry weapons, even sleek Cytherian vessels like Zephyra's own ship. "The network has established Heaven's Rest as the primary coordination node," Zephyra explained. "Every species that received the beacon message has sent representatives here." They were challenged by a human patrol ship as they entered the system. The captain, a weathered woman named Beth Morrison, nearly choked when Zephyra identified herself over the communication channel. "You're the Cytherian who sent the warning?" Morrison asked. "Ma'am, you just saved about 3 billion lives. What can we do for you?" "Grant us landing clearance," Zephyra replied. "There's something your people need to see." Heaven's Rest had been transformed. The planet's modest spaceport had been expanded using portable facilities from visiting ships, creating a sprawling complex that buzzed with activity. Representatives from across the galaxy were meeting in hastily constructed conference facilities, sharing intelligence and coordinating defensive strategies. But the real revelation was waiting. In the main conference center, Marcus followed Zephyra into a vast chamber, where holographic displays showed the current tactical situation. The hegemony fleets were indeed moving faster now, abandoning their careful positioning to launch immediate strikes against human targets. "The preliminary attacks will begin in 18 hours, announced Director Chen, the human coordinator, who had somehow been elected to manage this impossible gathering. "But we are not the same species the hegemony studied. We are no longer alone." The displays shifted to show the defensive preparations. Human colonies were being reinforced with technology, and personnel from allied species. Ancient Altarian defensive platforms were being hastily reactivated. Droken engineering teams were upgrading human ships with armor and weapons that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for centuries. "This is unprecedented," whispered an elderly Cytherian ambassador who had somehow found the courage to defy the hegemony. Council, in for 1,000 years of hegemony rule, nothing like this has ever been attempted. Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find Zephyra watching him, with an expression he couldn't quite identify. 13 years ago, you made a choice to save one life, she said quietly. Today, that choice has become a catalyst for the greatest alliance in galactic history. As if to emphasize her point, the tactical displays updated to show new rivals in the system. More ships were jumping in every hour, carrying supplies, personnel, and hope from worlds that had never dared to resist the hegemony before. Marcus looked around the chamber, at the impossible gathering, humans working alongside species they had only recently met, former enemies sharing technology and tactical intelligence, an entire galaxy choosing cooperation over fear. The hegemony was coming with their million-ship fleet, confident in their overwhelming superiority. But they were about to discover something that their 4,000 years of rule had never prepared them for. What happened when humanity's stubborn compassion infected the rest of the galaxy? Are we going to win? Marcus asked quietly. Zephyra's violet eyes gleamed with something that might have been hope. We are going to try, and sometimes, for humans, that is the same thing. Outside the conference center, the stars gleamed with the lights of ships from 100 different worlds, all united by a simple human truth: no one deserves to die alone. And afraid, no matter where they come from, the war that would reshape the galaxy was about to begin. And humanity had already won the most important battle. They had convinced the rest of the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for.